What happens when a music legend sits down for what should be a simple chat about his career and instead gets ambushed by a host who seems determined to tear him down on live television? In just 25 seconds of one comment, Denise Welch would go from television presenter to the most hated woman on morning TV, and Rod Stewart would become the hero who finally said what everyone watching at home was thinking. This is the story of the day loose women crossed a line they could never uncross. Rod Stewart walked onto the Loose Women set to massive applause from the studio audience. He was there to talk about his latest album, his upcoming tour, and maybe share a few stories from his incredible career. The rock legend, dressed sharply in a suit, waved to the crowd and took his seat on the famous panel sofa. Sitting across from him were the four hosts that day: Denise Welch, Kay Adams, Janet Street Porter, and Nadia Sawalha. The atmosphere seemed friendly enough at first. Warm smiles all around, pleasant greetings exchanged. But within minutes, everything would change. Kay Adams started things off with a softball question. "Rod, it's wonderful to have you here. Your new album has been doing incredibly well. What was the inspiration behind it?" Rod smiled, clearly comfortable and ready to share. "Well, I've been doing this for over 50 years now, and I still find inspiration everywhere. This album is really about looking back at the journey, but also looking forward. It's about gratitude, really. Gratitude for the fans, for the music, for life itself." The audience clapped warmly. Nadia Sawalha jumped in next. "That's beautiful, Rod. And you're still touring at your age, which is incredible. How do you keep up the energy?" "I think it's because I love what I do," Rod replied. "When you're passionate about something, age becomes just a number. Plus, I try to stay healthy, stay active, and the fans give me energy. When I see them singing along, that's all the fuel I need." More applause. Everything was going smoothly. Too smoothly. Then Denise Welch leaned forward, and there was something in her expression that changed the entire mood in the studio. A slight smirk. A look that suggested she had been waiting for her moment to strike. "Rod," she began, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "I have to ask you something that I think a lot of people have been wondering about." Rod nodded, still relaxed. "Sure, go ahead." "Well," Denise continued, "you've had quite a few relationships over the years. Multiple marriages. Several children with different women. Some people might say that shows a certain lack of commitment, wouldn't they? A certain inability to settle down." The audience went quiet. You could feel the tension immediately. Kay Adams shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Janet Street Porter raised her eyebrows. Nadia looked down at her notes. Rod's smile faded just slightly, but he remained, composed. "I think that's a bit of a harsh way to put it, Denise. I've been married 3 times, yes. And I have 8 wonderful children who I love very much. My relationships haven't always worked out, that's true. But I've always tried my best. I've always been there for my kids." "But have you, though?" Denise pressed, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "I mean, when you have that many children with different mothers, spread out across different countries, can you really be present for all of them? Or is it more about having your fun and then moving on when things get difficult?" The studio audience gasped. Someone in the back actually said, "Oh my God," loud enough to be heard. Rod sat up straighter, his jaw tightening. "Now hold on a minute. I don't appreciate the insinuation. I love my children, all of them, and I've worked very hard to maintain relationships with each and every one of them. Being a parent isn't always easy, especially when you have a career that takes you around the world, but I've never abandoned my responsibilities." Janet Street Porter, sensing things were escalating, tried to intervene. "Perhaps we should move on to talking about the music." But Denise wasn't finished. She cut Janet off completely. "I'm just saying what people at home are thinking, Rod. You're a wealthy man. You've lived a life of luxury and excess. Meanwhile, there are single mothers out there struggling to make ends meet, and here you are with multiple families, probably paying child support to keep everyone quiet while you continue living your rock star lifestyle. The other panelists looked absolutely mortified. Kay Adams actually put her hand over her mouth. Nadia shook her head in disbelief. Rod's face had gone from confused to genuinely angry. Paying to keep people quiet? What are you talking about? I take care of my children because they're my children. That's what a father does. And I don't appreciate you sitting here on national television making it sound like I'm some sort of deadbeat dad who throws money at problems. You don't know anything about my life or my relationships with my kids. Oh, but we know enough, don't we? Denise shot back, her voice rising. We know you've left a trail of broken hearts behind you. We know you've been engaged to women and then moved on to someone else. We know that you've had children in your 60s, which some people find quite selfish, actually, having kids when you'll be too old to properly raise them. That was the moment. The moment when Rod Stewart had clearly had enough. He stood up from the sofa, his microphone still clipped to his jacket. You know what, Denise? I came here today to talk about my music, to have a pleasant conversation, to connect with people who enjoy what I do. But instead, you've decided to turn this into some sort of personal attack on my character, on my family, on my choices as a father. And I'm not going to sit here and listen to it. The studio was dead silent. The cameras were still rolling. The other panelists sat frozen, unsure of what to do. Denise, incredibly, seemed to double down. Oh, so you're just going to walk away? Just like you've walked away from everything else in your life when it gets uncomfortable? Rod turned back to face her, and his voice was calm, but filled with intensity. No, Denise, I'm walking away because you're being disrespectful. Not just to me, but to my children, to the mothers of my children, to anyone watching who might be in a blended family or a complicated situation. You're passing judgment on people's lives, like you have any right to do that, like you're somehow morally superior. And you know what? You're not. Kay Adams finally found her voice. Rod, please, we didn't mean for this to... But Rod raised his hand gently to stop her. Kay, this isn't about you or Janet or Nadia. You've all been perfectly lovely. But Denise here seems to think that being on a panel gives her the right to tear people down, to make them feel small, to question their entire life choices on live television. And I've been in this business long enough to know when someone is trying to create drama at my expense. Denise crossed her arms defensively. I'm just asking the questions that people want answered. No, Rod said firmly. You're asking questions designed to make me look bad. There's a difference. You could have asked me about my relationship with my kids in a respectful way. You could have said, how do you maintain those bonds with such a busy career? But instead, you came at me with accusations and judgments. You made it personal. You made it nasty. Janet Street Porter, to her credit, spoke up. Rod's right. This has gone too far. Denise whipped her head around to look at Janet. Oh, so you're taking his side now? I'm not taking sides, Janet replied coolly. I'm pointing out that we've crossed a line from interviewing to interrogating, and it's not comfortable to watch. Nadia nodded in agreement. We should have stayed focused on the music. The audience began to clap, slowly at first, then building. They were clapping for Rod. Denise's face flushed red. She clearly hadn't expected this turn. So everyone's against me now. I'm the bad guy for asking honest questions. Rod, who had started to walk toward the edge of the set, turned back one more time. Denise, there's a way to ask honest questions with respect and dignity. You didn't do that. You went for the jugular from the start. And the worst part is, I don't think you even realize how hurtful your words were. My children might see this. Their mothers might see this. And what they'll see is someone trying to paint their father as a bad person for entertainment value. His voice cracked slightly with emotion, and that made the moment even more powerful. This wasn't just a celebrity throwing a tantrum. This was a father defending himself and his family. I've made mistakes in my life, Rod continued, his voice steadier now. I've had failed relationships. I've had regrets. But my children are not mistakes. My love for them is not a character flaw. And I will not stand here and let anyone suggest otherwise. The applause from the audience grew louder. Some people were standing now. Denise tried one more time to regain control. Rod, if you would just sit back down, we can discuss this like adults. Like adults? Rod let out a bitter laugh. Adults don't ambush their guests. Adults don't use someone's personal life as fodder for ratings. Adults show respect, even when they disagree. And you, Denise, have shown me none of that today. Kay Adams stood up, trying to smooth things over. Rod, on behalf of the show, I want to apologize if anything said here today. Rod held up his hand again, but his expression softened when he looked at Kay. You don't need to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong. But I think it's best if I leave now. I'm not going to sit here and be insulted any longer. He reached down and unclipped his microphone, carefully placing it on the arm of the sofa. The simple act of removing the mic felt symbolic, like he was officially done with the entire situation. Nadia spoke up quickly. Rod, we really do appreciate you coming on today. We're sorry this happened. I appreciate that, Nadia, Rod replied graciously. And I want to be clear to everyone watching at home. I'm not upset about being asked tough questions. I've been interviewed thousands of times. I've answered difficult questions before. But there's a difference between journalism and cruelty. And what happened here today felt more like the latter. Denise, who had been silent for a moment, suddenly stood up as well. You're being incredibly dramatic, Rod. I was simply trying to have a candid conversation. Candid? Rod's voice rose slightly. You accused me of being a bad father. You suggested I abandoned my children. You implied I'm selfish for having kids later in life. That's not candid, Denise. That's cruel. And what's worse is you're trying to justify it now instead of just admitting you went too far. Janet Street Porter interjected again. She should admit it. This was out of line. Denise shot Janet an angry look. Stay out of this, Janet. I won't stay out of it, Janet fired back. Because I'm sitting here watching a guest get treated appallingly, and I'm part of this panel. That makes it my business. Rod came here in good faith, and he's being attacked for his personal life when he's here to promote his work. It's unprofessional. The tension between the panelists themselves was now adding another layer to the drama. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every uncomfortable second. Rod shook his head slowly. You know what the saddest part is? I've been a fan of this show. I've watched it before. I thought it was about women having honest conversations, supporting each other, talking about real issues. But this felt like a hit job. And I can't help but wonder if you had this plan from the start, Denise. Did you decide before I even walked out here that you were going to try and tear me down? That's ridiculous, Denise snapped. I don't need to plan anything. I just speak my mind. Speaking your mind is one thing, Rod countered. Being needlessly cruel is another. And you've been needlessly cruel today. Not just to me, but to my family. And that's something I can't forgive. The audience was completely on Rod's side now. There were murmurs of agreement, heads nodding, and someone even shouted, "Good for you, Rod!" Kay tried once more to salvage the situation. Perhaps we can all take a breath But Rod was already walking away. I'm sorry, Kay, but I'm done here. I came to talk about music and ended up defending my entire life. That's not what I signed up for. As he moved toward the exit, Denise called out after him. Running away won't change the facts, Rod. He stopped in his tracks, turned around slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet but powerful. The facts, Denise, are that I have 8 beautiful children who I love with all my heart. The facts are that I've been making music for over 5 decades, and I'm still passionate about it. The facts are that I've lived a full life with ups and downs, just like everyone else. And the facts are that you tried to make me feel ashamed of my life today, and you failed. Because I'm not ashamed. I'm proud of who I am and what I've built, and no amount of your bitterness or judgment is going to change that. The audience erupted in applause. It was thunderous. People were on their feet. Some were even cheering. Denise stood there, arms still crossed, face red, clearly furious, but also visibly shaken by the reaction. She had expected support, or at least for Rod to simply defend himself weakly and move on. Instead, she had created a moment where she was clearly the villain, and he was clearly the hero. Janet Street Porter started clapping too. Then, Nadia joined in. Even Kay, though she looked torn, gave a few polite claps. Denise looked at her fellow panelists with betrayal in her eyes. "You're all applauding him?" "We're applauding someone standing up for themselves," Janet said firmly. "Something you would understand if you weren't so busy trying to tear people down." Rod gave a small nod to the audience, a gesture of thanks, and then he walked off the set. The cameras followed him as he disappeared backstage, and then they cut back to the panel where 4 women sat in stunned silence. Well, 3 women in stunned silence. Denise was seething. Kay Adams, ever the professional, tried to bring things to some kind of conclusion. "Well, that was certainly unexpected. We'll take a quick break and be right back." But before they could cut to commercial, Denise spoke up, her voice sharp. "I don't understand what just happened. I asked legitimate questions." Nadia turned to her, and there was disappointment in her eyes. "Denise, those weren't legitimate questions. Those were attacks, and you need to recognize that." "I don't need to recognize anything," Denise shot back. "If he can't handle a few tough questions, then maybe he shouldn't be doing interviews." Janet laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A few tough questions? You basically called him a terrible father and accused him of being selfish and irresponsible on live television in front of millions of people, and you're surprised he walked out?" "He's a public figure," Denise argued. "His life is open to scrutiny." "His work is open to scrutiny," Kay corrected gently but firmly. "His music, his performances, his public statements. But his private family life, his relationships with his children, that's personal. And the way you went after him was personal. Too personal." The audience was still buzzing. People were talking amongst themselves, clearly shocked by what they had just witnessed. Denise looked around at the faces staring at her, some confused, some angry, some disappointed, and for a brief moment you could see something flicker across her face. Maybe doubt, maybe regret, but it was quickly replaced by defiance. "I stand by everything I said. Someone needed to ask those questions." "No one needed to ask those questions that way," Nadia said softly. And now Rod Stewart, a music legend, a man who has given so much to the entertainment world, is going to remember this show as the place where he was disrespected and attacked. Is that really how you want to be remembered? Denise didn't answer. She just sat there, jaw clenched, looking straight ahead at the cameras. Kay tried one more time to wrap things up professionally. "We're going to take that break now. When we come back, we'll be discussing... well, we'll figure out what we're discussing." As the show finally cut to commercial, the damage was done. The moment was captured. The clash was complete. What was supposed to be a simple promotional interview had turned into a viral moment that would define Denise Welch's reputation for years to come. And Rod Stewart? He walked away with his dignity intact, having stood up not just for himself, but for anyone who has ever been unfairly judged or attacked for their personal choices. The other panelists sat in uncomfortable silence during the commercial break. Nadia was shaking her head. Janet was on her phone, probably already seeing the social media reaction. Kay was talking to a producer off camera, her face serious and concerned. And Denise? Denise sat alone on her end of the sofa, isolated by her own actions, surrounded by people who had just watched her cross a line that should never have been crossed. The worst part for her was that she still didn't seem to fully understand what she had done wrong. Or maybe she understood, but was too proud to admit it. Either way, the result was the same. She had turned what should have been a pleasant interview into a battleground, and she had lost spectacularly. Rod Stewart, meanwhile, was backstage, probably being consoled by his team, probably being told he did the right thing by walking out, probably feeling a mix of anger and vindication. He had come to promote his music and instead had been forced to defend his character. But in doing so, he had shown exactly who he was. A man with dignity. A man with boundaries. A man who wouldn't be pushed around or made to feel small, no matter how famous the platform or how aggressive the interviewer. The studio audience was still talking amongst themselves as the commercial break continued. You could hear snippets of conversation. Did you see that? I can't believe she said those things. Good for him for walking out. She should apologize. The consensus was clear. The audience was on Rod's side, overwhelmingly. When the show came back from commercial, Kay Adams addressed the situation briefly. Before we continue, I just want to acknowledge what happened earlier with Rod Stewart. Emotions ran high, and things were said that perhaps shouldn't have been said in that way. We hope to have Rod back on the show in the future under better circumstances. It was a diplomatic statement, but it didn't address the real issue. It didn't name Denise specifically. It didn't acknowledge that one person had been the aggressor. It was the kind of corporate speak that tries to smooth over controversy without actually dealing with it. Denise, for her part, said nothing. She sat there with a tight smile, looking like she wanted to be anywhere but on that sofa. The rest of the show continued, but the energy was different. Flat. Awkward. The chemistry between the panelists had been broken. Janet barely spoke to Denise. Nadia kept her distance. Kay tried to keep things moving, but you could tell her heart wasn't in it. And through it all, the shadow of what had happened hung over everything. Rod Stewart had walked out. A music legend had been driven off the set by aggressive personal attacks disguised as interview questions. And one host had revealed herself to be not the champion of honest conversation she perhaps thought she was, but someone willing to hurt others for the sake of drama and ratings. The interview that was supposed to be about music and celebration had instead become about boundaries and respect, about knowing when to push and when to pull back, about understanding that public figures are still human beings, with feelings and families and lives that matter beyond their celebrity status. Rod Stewart had taught everyone watching a valuable lesson that day, that it's okay to walk away from situations where you're being treated poorly, that you don't have to sit there and take abuse just because someone has a microphone and a platform. That dignity and self-respect are more important than playing nice for the cameras. And Denise Welch had taught everyone a lesson too, though probably not the one she intended. She showed what happens when you let your desire for a dramatic moment override your basic sense of decency. When you prioritize conflict over conversation. When you forget that the person sitting across from you is a real human being, not just content for your show. The clash would be talked about for days, weeks, months afterward. Clips would be shared online. Think pieces would be written. People would debate whether Denise had a point or whether she had gone too far. But most people, the vast majority of people who watched that interview, came away with the same conclusion. Rod Stewart was the good guy. He was the one defending his family. He was the one standing up for himself. He was the one who showed grace under pressure and knew when enough was enough. And Denise Welch was the one who had pushed too hard, gone too far, and turned what should have been a pleasant conversation into a hostile interrogation. She was the one who had made a guest feel unwelcome and attacked. She was the one who had created the drama that led to a legendary musician walking off the set. In those 25 seconds when she first started asking about his personal relationships, when she first injected that poison into the conversation, Denise Welch had set in motion a chain of events that would define that episode of Loose Women forever. Not as a place where interesting conversations happen, but as a place where a line was crossed and a guest was driven away. And Rod Stewart? He walked away with his head held high, knowing he had done nothing wrong, knowing he had defended himself and his family with dignity and strength. He had shown millions of people watching that it's not only okay to stand up for yourself, it's necessary, that you don't owe anyone your peace of mind or your self-respect, no matter how famous they are or what platform they have. The music legend had come for a simple interview, and instead had delivered a masterclass in setting boundaries and demanding respect. And in doing so, he had become the hero of his own story, while Denise Welch had become the cautionary tale of what happens when you forget that kindness and respect should always come before drama and ratings.